Are you looking for ways to strengthen your marriage? Would you like to raise children you enjoy being around? Do you long for a peaceful, orderly home that's a blessing to everyone who comes through its doors? Then you've come to the right place. I'm Jennifer Flanders, a Bible-believing, homeschooling mother to 12 and host of the Loving Life at Home podcast. Join me as we discover what God's Word has to say about marriage, motherhood, and minding the things that matter most. Hello, friend. Welcome to episode 53 of Loving Life at Home. I'm tackling another question from a listener today, a listener who also happens to be my daughter-in-law and is probably the most faithful listener I have, with the possible exception of my own mother. But such as it may be, Rebecca Joy asked if I would cover some of the microsystems that my husband and I have set up over the years to keep our home and family schedules running smoothly. She noted that her husband, my son, Samuel, brought a lot of these methods into their marriage, and she marvels at how helpful they've been. So she was intrigued to learn more and also hopefully to discover how many of the microsystems he set up in their house are the product of his own problem-solving mind and how many he has just inherited from his parents. I think that's a very valid question, and it certainly falls within the scope of my Titus 2 goals of teaching younger women to be sober and love their husbands, to love their children, to be keepers at home. And so I can't promise you that the list of microsystems I'm sharing today will be complete. That's the funny thing about building helpful habits into your home life. They eventually become so second nature that you don't even think about the fact that you're doing them. But I'll try to hit on as many as I can remember that deal with homemaking, and I've grouped them into categories to add a little structure to the few that I could identify. So let's tackle home organization today, starting with the area that so many of us encounter first when we step into the house, and that's the garage. Although right now we're in a rent house and we never have to go through the garage to get to the back door, but most of the houses that we've lived in, save for the very first apartment, we've entered the house through the garage. And so the very first thing we want to know when we come in is, where do we put our keys? How would you like to know exactly where to find your car keys and never again be forced to hunt a misplaced set when you're already running late for an appointment? I could probably count on one hand the number of times in the past 30 years I've had to frantically search for lost keys in a panic because we designated a place for keys early on and we've been faithful to use it consistently. For us, that took the form of 3M hooks on a wall or inside a cabinet door just inside the garage. Or since we currently live in a house where as many members park in front as park behind our house, we have a little drawer currently that all the keys go into. But I really prefer the hooks because then the keys are exactly in the same place every time. You don't have to rummage around in a drawer to find them. We do try to make it easier by color coding the keys. So we have several cars because we have several adult children that are living in this house, and each child has a certain color carabiner for their car. So, for instance, my husband has green, one son has blue, another son has red, one of my daughters has pink. Anyway, when they're on the hooks, each car has two keys, so they have two carabiners associated with it. That way, if somebody doesn't put the keys back, there's still a key available to move the car if we need to. But most of the time, everybody puts their keys where they belong, and you just have to reach in and get the color carabiner for the car you're trying to drive to be able to move it. I don't like the drawer method quite as well as the hook method because you do have to root around a bit to find the keys you're looking for, and you have to stop and think what color belongs to the car that you need. Whereas with the hooks, they're always hanging in the exact same position, and they're clearly labeled. The hooks are labeled Mom, Dad, Ben, Joe, Becca, and so forth. So you can see at a glance what key you need and just grab it and go. Then another thing that we do is we also keep laundry baskets right by the back door, either right inside the house in a cabinet or right outside beside the door. For many, many years, I kept a dark and a light basket so people could just sort the laundry in as they went. My husband does most of the laundry today and does not usually take time to separate lights from dark, so we don't have double baskets anymore at the doors. We just have a single basket so that as people come in, if they have socks or clothes that are dirty, they can just put them right there before they ever enter the house. We also try to keep some shelving for shoes right next to the back door. We typically don't wear our shoes into the house. It keeps the floors cleaner that way, and it always helps us know exactly where the shoes are. I have a basket by the front door for people coming in through the front door to toss their shoes into, but at the back door, we just have a different shelf for each person, and they put whatever shoes they're wearing that day on the shelf, and when they come out of the door ready to leave, they grab the shoes that they want and go. Then another thing, since we have shoes in the garage, we used to keep the socks out there too, so that when the kids were getting ready for church or to go to co-op or something like that, as they were putting on their shoes on the steps of the garage, they could grab their socks too. Again, in this rent house, I don't have a place for that little nightstand that I used for the purpose. Before the nightstand, I had a little set of just Rubbermaid drawers with a different drawer for each person's socks. Oh, and that's also a different microsystem, which is when we were early in our marriage, I had lots of different socks. Every child had multiple colors of socks and multiple styles. And my husband saw me sorting unmatched socks one night. I had over 75 unmatched socks for 2 or maybe 3 children at the time. And he said, this is ridiculous. We need to just get rid of all these socks, and each child will have their distinctive style socks, crew socks, or maybe all the socks will be the same, but the toes will be different colors. So one child has gray toes and one has white toes and one has pink toes and that sort of thing, toes and heels on the socks. So it was easy to tell which sock belonged to which child. And if somebody didn't put it in the dirty clothes, we knew who did it, because you could recognize the sock. Anyway, those socks were kept in a drawer. So each child had a drawer. For a while, we had a little stack of Rubbermaid drawers, like I said, with those socks, and they were all labeled with the children's names. Later, we had just a really large nightstand that had divided drawers in it, and so each child had a divided area in that drawer. Then also, we in the garage would have a cabinet for our tools, and I'd labeled those drawers so that if they got a hammer out or a wrench, or my husband needed a tool and wanted to find it quickly, it was easy to see the labels on the drawers and know exactly where to look for a screwdriver or a wrench. And then hooks were also something that we've typically had in the garage, although right now our hooks are in a coat closet inside the house. But we put a row of hooks so that each child had a hook. And when our children were little, we would go swimming every night during the summer. And so those hooks were the perfect place for them to hang their wet swimsuits so that they could dry out before the next evening when it was time to go again. And then in the wintertime, the swimsuits were put away because we weren't swimming in the winter, but the hooks were great for their coats. And so they'd grab their coats as they went out the back door and be ready to face the cooler weather. And then when they came in, they would just hang them on the hooks. And it was a lot easier than using hangers, and it kept everything neat and tidy. And again, the hooks were labeled, and so they were in order, youngest to oldest, and everybody knew which peg was theirs and would put their swimsuit or their coat on the peg that belonged to them. By that same token, we had lots of wet towels when we swam every night. And so what I did for that was just to hang a long 12-foot dowel by chains from the ceiling of the garage, and the kids could just throw their towel over that dowel and kind of spread it out flat, and they would dry that way and be ready to go to the pool again the next day. That kept us from having to wash towels every single time we went to the swimming pool, because it really was a nightly occurrence there for a long time. Then another thing that really helped us keep our garage tidy was painting the floor. My mom and dad always painted their floor, and it was usually clean enough to eat off of. I can't say the same for mine, but mine is pretty neat usually. Again, we're in a rent house right now without a painted floor, and it just gets so dusty and chalky without that paint. But with the paint, it's easy to sweep out, it's easy to mop, and it just looks nice. And so painting the floor, my parents used to have our birthday parties out in the garage, and it didn't really matter how big a mess we made because it was very easy cleanup. Also, to keep the bikes neat, we would have a bike rack. Now, my son has built a bike rack for their bikes out of wood, which just has a little slot for the front tire of each bike, and it keeps them upright where they don't have to use their kickstands, and they're all lined up, ready to go next time they want to take a ride. The one that we have used for years and years and are still using is one that my husband had custom welded for us, because for a long time we had 14 bikes. We had a bunch of bikes. And so we would just line them up on that bike rack, and it kept the garage so much neater that way. Also, we would put up shelving for sports equipment. Basketballs would go in one laundry basket and tennis rackets in another. And so we would just line up those things on shelves, and it was easy access, but also kept everything nice and tidy. And while we're on the topic of bikes and sporting equipment, we might as well talk about toys as well, because there are certainly some microsystems in place that have been in place in our family for decades now. And one of the biggest ones is toy rotation. We've never had a dedicated playroom, but we do have lots of experience living in tight spaces. Our first 3 children were born while we were still living in a small apartment. And when my husband was in the Army Reserves, we spent 4 months living in a 500 square foot bachelor barracks with 10 children. And so being able to keep things tidy was really a plus. And part of our strategy there was to rotate the toys. We never give our kids full access to all their playthings at once. I would instead group their toys into categories, Duplos, Lincoln Logs, plastic dinosaurs, Matchbox cars, baby dolls, etc. And we'd keep each category in a separate box or bin, stored out of our children's reach in the top of a locked closet or on a high shelf in the garage. The kids didn't have free reign to access those toys. They'd just ask for what they want, and then I would get it down. They'd play with it until they were tired of playing, then pick it all up before trading it out for something new. Now, limited access meant limited mess. There are lots of advantages to putting kids' toys on a rotation schedule. One of the most obvious is the fact that when kids can't reach all their toys at once, they don't drag them all out at the same time. So any toy mess they create is automatically smaller and easier to clean up than it might have been otherwise. And I store those toys in a way that makes cleanup as easy as possible. I made sure each category of toys was stored in a box big enough that everything could be tossed in quickly when it came time to pick up. If the toys have to be carefully arranged like some kind of IQ puzzle to fit back into the container, you have a much too small container, and you might as well forget having the kids pick up for you. If the toys can be tossed back into the bucket with plenty of room to spare, even toddlers can help pick up and be proud of themselves for doing so. Those big bins of Lincoln Logs and Duplos that I mentioned, those blocks fit inside with room to spare, so everyone can help, and cleanup takes less than a minute or two. While most of our toys are stored up high, I have always kept 2 round wooden boxes with pretty painted lids within easy reach for when my children were little, or now for when the grandkids come to visit. Each of those 2 boxes fit under a pair of matching leather chairs in our living room, and they look pretty, but the kids know that they can play with either one of them while their parents visit. And I've done that since my own children were little. They were allowed to get them out without asking permission while I was cooking dinner or napping or talking on the phone. But I would regularly rotate other toys from the top of the closet into those easy to access box every few weeks to make sure their kids didn't grow tired playing with just the same few things. I probably need to do that again for my grandkids right now, because their current favorites are Matchbox cars and dinosaurs, and they could easily fit in those 2 boxes underneath my chairs, but I have some domino sets that they don't play with quite as much. So I should switch those out while I'm thinking about it. The storage looks decorative that way, and I don't mind it being visible, and it's still really easy for the kids to quickly pick up by themselves. Depending on your style, a big picnic basket with a lid could work, or a vintage suitcase, or maybe even an ottoman with hidden storage would work well. The secret is just to train your kids not to get all of them out at once, and to put put the things back when they're finished playing with them. Another big help to keeping the toy box tamed is to routinely purge your children's playthings. For many of us, the best way to begin organizing kids' toys is by getting rid of about half of them. Most children these days own way more toys than they will ever play with, and the excess just creates confusion and chaos, and it prevents them from enjoying the toys that they really do like, and sometimes makes the playroom or family den look like a tornado struck it. So clear out the clutter and toss the stuff that's broken or missing parts. If you need to enlist your kids' help, depending on their ages, you may have to consult them before purging their playthings, or at least hang on to the things that you want to discard for a while in case anything is missed or is more special than you realized. You can put all the junky plastic stuff and the Happy Meal toys and things that they never really play with in a cardboard box and put it in the attic for a month or two. My own mother did that to me one time when my messy closet was driving her crazy. She put everything she thought should be tossed or donated into a big black trash bag and moved it to our storage room. And she told me several times that I could go through it and get out anything I wanted to keep, but I never got around to doing that, and she eventually just sent it all packing. I was sad when I realized that several trophies and all my blue ribbons and award certificates had been in that sack, but I really can't blame her because she did give me ample opportunity to reclaim it. And the only thing that I'd recommend doing differently than what she did is to use a box instead of a trash bag, which is a little bit easier to go through and is also more neatly stored in the interim. Allow room, though, for sentimentality, at least in moderation. Some kids, like some adults, seem deeply attached to their belongings. I suspect that they are mostly attached to the memories associated with those belongings. I know that's definitely the case for me. When they look at that possession, it reminds them of the person who gave them the gift or the vacation they were on when they first got the item or some other significant or not so significant life event. I remember going through my son's stuffed animal collection. He was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when he was 22 months old and spent a week at Children's Hospital in Dallas getting things under control before he came back home. And he came home from that week at Children's with more stuffed animals than you could shake a stick at, because every time they came in to take a blood pressure or to take his temperature or adjust his medication or give him a shot or test his blood, every single time they came in that room, they brought in new stuffed animals. So he came home with so many stuffed animals, just bagfuls. And we were kind of drowning in them. So I let him keep them for a few months and then bagged them up. We were having a garage sale and I was going to get rid of some of the excess things we had at the house. And unbeknownst to me, there was one little yellow dog in there. He called his diabetic dog. The nurses had used that dog to help him learn how to give a shot. Every time they had to give him a shot, he was able to give the little diabetic dog a shot first. And so he saw that on the table before I opened the garage sale and started crying, "Mom, you can't sell the diabetic dog." And he's so right. And I've been made to feel so guilty ever since that I'd even consider selling that diabetic dog. But I tried to make it up to him. I made the dog his own little carry case. And every time my son had a pair of blue jeans that was worn out at the knee or short sets or anything that needed to be altered, I would save the scraps and make the diabetic dog a little outfit just like my son. And so he had this little carry case for his diabetic dog and all these little clothes that matched him and still has them today. So that obviously was the right decision to keep that diabetic dog. And so special toys get special treatment. If your child does have a favorite stuffed animal or favorite doll like that, by all means, let him or her hold on to that one rather than storing it away with the rest of the toys. We let our daughters keep their American Girl dolls in their room for anytime play, and that firstborn son got to keep his diabetic dog with him at all times. And oh my goodness, that thing came to the zoo with us more times than once. It one time fell out of a monorail at the Dallas Zoo into an enclosure with the wild animals, and the zoo workers were so kind to go and retrieve it when they realized how special it was to my son. I had another son that had a homemade black Zorro mask that I had made by his request for him, and he kept that thing in his pocket whenever it wasn't on his face. And so for the time that my kids were fixated on specific toys, now they couldn't fixate on every single toy we owned, but if there were one or two really special things like a doll or a stuffed animal, we let them keep those with them. And then when they lost interest in them, they would be put on rotation with the rest of them. The dolls would go back to the doll bucket, and the Zorro mask would go back to the costume bucket, and things like that. So whenever you're deciding which toys to keep and which to purge, go for those toys that can be used in multiple ways. A large scarf can be a superhero cape or a baby blanket or a sling for a broken arm or a turban or a sash. You get the idea. Similarly, blocks can be used to build cities or roads or skyscrapers or cabins or fences or pyramids. That's why we're real big fans of Duplos and wooden train tracks and Lincoln logs. And we have a big bin of each of those still in our garage today that we get out when the grandkids are over. Not only do our own kids still play with them, young and old alike, but those grandkids love them too. And the initial cost, which was minimal because I bought most of those toys at garage sales for pennies on the dollar in the first place, has proven to be such a worthwhile investment because those classic old toys do not wear out. The same blocks and trains and Duplos I brought home for my own children to play with more than 35 years ago are still entertaining my grandkids today, and they'll likely enthrall my great-grandchildren as well before it's all said and done. So, rotated toys, we found hold kids' interest long. When kids are daily tripping over the same old toys, they hardly even take notice of them. Put them out of reach for a few weeks, and suddenly those same playthings seem newer and more appealing. But that's enough on toys. Let's move on into the kitchen. I've written extensively about my methods and microsystems for organizing kitchens and streamlining meal prep, including a couple of posts on our family blog and even a book called Sit Down and Eat, all of which I'll link in today's show notes, along with my tips for organizing the garage and the toys. I'll cover a few of my favorites in this episode, though, starting with stations. It's so helpful when laying out your kitchen if you consider where you're going to be doing certain tasks and store everything you need right there. For instance, we drink a lot of hot tea, so I have a box that we keep all of our hot teas in and our tea strainers and our tea timers, and it's right next to the hot tea kettle, and everything is just right there where you can access it. The cups that we drink the tea out of are right on the shelf above the tea box, and so you don't have to move from one side of the kitchen and one area to the other to complete that task. It's all there where you need it. Likewise, when I'm cooking, all my pots and pans are stored next to the stove top, and plates and silverware are stored really close to the table where we put them out. Then another thing that has helped in the kitchen is to have duplicate tools. And I'll talk about this more in the episode where I address children's chores and child training. But having duplicate tools like 2 potato peelers and 2 melon scoops and stuff like that allows you to work right next to your children. A lot of times when they're little, they want so much to help, and a lot of that is just wanting to be close to you and learning the skills that you are good at. And so rather than doing things sequentially, you measure the tablespoon of baking powder that needs to go in the batter and hand it to him, to your child, and have that child put it in the bowl. That really does slow you down, and it makes a task take about 3 times as long as it would take without the help. And there are times where that is called for, but most often you can work side by side on tasks, and your child will not slow you down. They will actually help, and that is by having multiple tools. So, for instance, if I'm peeling potatoes or peeling carrots, and my little one comes up and wants to help peel, rather than passing off my potato peeler and finding something else to do while they peel, I just grab the extra one out, give it to them. Then it doesn't matter how slowly they peel that carrot. I can peel 10 carrots in the time they peel the one, but they've still contributed the one and they haven't slowed me down any. So the same is true for stemming grapes or chopping tomatoes, or, if you just have 2 cutting boards and 2 knives, they can work right beside you. If you have 2 can openers, they can open their 1 can to your 3. You can work side by side and do the same task and help as needed, and they will be gaining proficiency in the areas that really will be a big help to you as they get better at it, and you're capitalizing on their enthusiasm while they're young. And doing it that way with duplicate tools really helps you to remain efficient in your time use in the kitchen, but still have your children come alongside you, that especially the ones that want to be there. And then, of course, when you have guests and other people offer to help you with things, if you have 2 or 3 cutting boards, 2 or 3 potato peelers, that sort of thing, everybody can be working together, and that does help out. Then something else that I have made a habit of doing is mixing things in double batches. Now, with a family as big as ours is, a lot of times I have to have double batches just to feed them for the night. But I'm talking about like if I'm browning beef, I will brown twice as much as I need for the recipe I'm making right then, and use the rest of it in a recipe later in the week. Or freeze it for use even further down the road than that. So it just streamlines meal prep later. If I'm making a big batch of minestrone soup, I will make double, put 1 straight in the pot and the other in a Ziploc bag to freeze for later. And then when I'm in a rush sometime, I can just pull it out of the freezer, pop it in the pressure cooker, and it will be ready in less than half an hour. Then same for lentil soup, and soups are really easy to do that with, to make multiple batches at once. My children and I took a class in making freezer meals together. They loved it, and we learned a lot, and it was really life-changing as far as our routines went, because they felt so accomplished helping and were willing to continue helping even when we went through all those steps at home, and we were able to lay up so many meals. After just an hour or 2 of work, we'd have enough meals to last us for a whole month, and it really cut down on food prep day to day that way. Then another microsystem that we have employed for many years has to do with making it obvious whether the dishes in the dishwasher are clean or dirty. Do you ever have that problem where you are emptying the dishwasher and realize about halfway through that the cycle hasn't run yet? Well, we don't like that when that happens. And so to prevent it from happening, for many years, I would just keep a dry erase marker right beside the dishwasher. And whenever we emptied the dishwasher, I would write the word dirty in that dry erase marker. And when the next cycle ran, it would wash off. And so if you opened the dishwasher and it said dirty, you knew it was still dirty. And if you opened it up and there wasn't the word there, you knew the cycle had run. Problem is that only worked for a stainless steel interior. My sister, I told her about that tip, and she tried it on her dishwasher at home. Fortunately, she tested before she wrote the big word dirty on the interior of hers, and it stained and wouldn't come off at all. And we eventually ended up in a house that didn't have a stainless steel interior of the dishwasher either. And so we had to come up with a new way. Now, I know they make like magnets that you can put on the front that say clean or dirty. The problem is when you live in a house full of toddlers, those toddlers will come along and play with that magnet and flip it back and forth, and you don't know what side it should be on when you come back to look at that dishwasher. And it may say clean when it's not, or dirty when it's not. And you have no way of knowing because those little magnets are so easy to flip around. So we had to come up with something that was a little bit more foolproof than that. And what we finally settled on was, as soon as we finish emptying the dishwasher, we put the soap in for the next cycle and shut the little drawer the soap goes in. Then when you run the cycle, the door pops open. So when you open the door of your dishwasher, if that little detergent drawer is open, you know the cycle's run. And if it's closed, you know and the dishes in there are still dirty. Now, we always rinse our dishes before we put it in the dishwasher anyway, so they look pretty clean even when we haven't run the cycle. So that is one reason that we want to make sure that we know for sure the cycle hasn't been run. And by putting the soap in, and that's just a habit you have to get in and train everybody else in the family to adhere to that habit and to recognize what it means when you open the dishwasher and see that the door is still closed, they're dirty, the door is popped open, and they are clean. Then for pantry organizations, one of the biggest things that has helped us keep our pantry organized is just putting a little flip lock on the door. Now, if you visit historic homes, you will often find a pie safe, which could be locked so little ones wouldn't polish off the desserts before dinner. Well, our grandmothers had the right idea, so we just put these little flip locks in nearly every house we've owned. We've installed one of those on the pantry. I also use them on the closets where I store the toys and the costumes and the Christmas decorations and anything else I didn't want little ones to get into. The master bedroom as well. So when my husband and I needed privacy, we could just flip that block. The flip locks I'm talking about are just a little hinge that you screw onto the door frame. And then when the door is closed, you can just flip it over, that little hinge over, and it catches in a small groove. And that keeps anybody from getting in until you lift and push that little brass plate back out of the way. So it only works on a door that you're locking from the side that you're pulling the door into. So if your pantry has, for some reason, a door that you push forward into the pantry to walk in, a flip lock won't help. But if your pantry has a door that when you open it, it swings out towards you, then a flip lock definitely will keep little ones out of the pantry, which is great because I've had little ones who go into the pantry and wreak all sorts of havoc. For instance, one time, and I know I had a flip lock on the door, so you have to train everybody in the family to put that lock into place after they come out of the pantry. I mean, all the adults and older children that are accessing the pantry, you need to train to re-engage the lock when they're not in there. Because one time I had a toddler go into my pantry when I thought it was locked and safe. They had gone in and found a whole shelf, probably a month's supply of canned peaches. And these cans had the little easy open pull tab tops. And when I found that toddler, he was sitting on the floor in a pile of peaches. He had pulled off the pull tab top to every single can on that bottom shelf. Anyway, it was such a mess that I didn't want that to happen again. So in addition to training the older people in the family to re-engage that flip lock, I also moved all those easy pull tab cans up to a higher shelf and put ones that you'd have to have a can opener to open on the bottom, so he couldn't ever do that again. Let's move on, though, to bedrooms. I have, again, a full list of specific tips that I'll link in the show notes. For the most part, and especially when our kids were younger, our bedrooms were used primarily for sleeping or reading, not for play. Those toys were generally played with in common areas where I could keep my eyes on everyone, and cleanup was much easier. We didn't take the toys outside. We played with toys inside, and just, the only thing that ever went outside was bicycles and sports equipment. Or maybe we had a sandbox for a while, and the sandbox had some toys in it, but, buckets and spades in it. But other than that, the toys stay inside, and that helps keep them from getting strung out and lost also. So for the most part, we didn't play in the bedroom. Cleanup was easier that way. If they wanted to play with Legos, they would spread a big quilt with the white side up on the floor of the den, or if they were trying to keep things out of baby's reach, they'd do it on the dining room table and build on top of that, which kept the bricks from getting lost and made cleanup faster. Then it also helped to have easy-to-make beds. If kids struggle to make their beds, you can streamline the process for them. Our little ones usually just wanted a fitted sheet with a colorful quilt or comforter, no top sheets and no blankets. It made it so much easier for young children to make their beds themselves. And so even now that they're adults, a lot of them, I just ordered new sheets for my 3 sons that share a room and said, do you want me to get top sheets now that you're older? I really like having a top sheet to my bed. I stay warmer with the top sheet underneath all my quilts. But they said, no, we just want our quilt and the bottom sheet, and they still make their bed nice and neat every morning, but that's because really they just spread out that one thing and it's good to go. So that is definitely a help to us in keeping their rooms tidy. Then I already told you that we put a hamper by the back door, but that's not the only hamper in the house. That would mean we would have dirty clothes everywhere probably if everybody had to traipse into the garage to put their dirty clothes away. So we also keep hampers either in one of the bedroom closets or in the bathroom that the kids use. Then also storing underwear in the bathroom is really a great idea. It keeps kids from forgetting that they didn't bring their underwear to the bathroom and having to run through the house in a towel. So we usually do that. I guess the boys don't have theirs in there right now, but they're right next to their bathroom, but I definitely have mine in there. And we certainly did that when they were younger. So keeping hampers handy, then it also helps to pare down clothing. We only hang clothes in their closets that fit properly and are in season. Most of my kids are grown now and they're not continuing to grow, so this is not as much of an issue. But when they were younger and staggered ages, stair-step ages, we would clean out their closets, go through their clothes twice a year at the change of seasons, even though here in Texas we don't really have seasons to speak of. Our winter lasts about 2 weeks, but we do at least twice a year would go through their clothes and get rid of anything that didn't fit. If it was something that was still in wonderful shape that we were going to use for a younger sibling, a lot of times our boys were like, we had 4 boys in a row and then another 3 boys in a row. And so it was easy to move clothes just from one rod in the closet to the next child's rod in the closet, because as one grew out, the next one grew into it. But for the times that we needed to put the clothes away for a couple of years until the next same-sex child was ready for it, we would just put it in the top of their closet in labeled boxes. So we'd have, girls' clothes 0 to 6 months, girls' clothes 6 months to 12 months, girls' clothes 2T, 3T, 4T, and the same for the boys. And so we could really keep the clothes pared down by not hanging real summery clothes in their closets during fall and winter, and not hanging sweaters and sweatshirts in their closet during summer and spring. And then making sure that what was hanging in their closet was well mended and clean and fit properly. And that kept our laundry situation a lot more manageable. Also, we went through periods where some of our kids would want to change clothes 14 times a day. And so for a time, we had to put those flip locks on the closet doors also to keep little ones from going in there and taking everything off the hangers and trying it on one thing after the other. Now, to counteract that, we did have and still do have lots of dress-up clothes. And so we'd keep a box handy of capes and tabards for boys and princess dresses and things like that for girls, that they could still enjoy changing their clothes without undoing a whole week's worth of laundry. Also, in addition to assigning a rod in the closet or a portion of a rod to each child, we would assign drawers in whatever chests we had available. So right now we have 2 girls in a room that are sharing a 6-drawer chest, so each gets 3 drawers. One gets one side and one gets the other. If I had 3 boys, like we have right now, sharing a room, and there was a 6-drawer chest in their room, then each would get 2 drawers. And so that also helps with sentimental kids. If they have lots of things they want to hold on to, we require them to purge so that it stays contained in the personal drawers they've been assigned, So if they love rocks and they want to bring in rocks from outside and store them in their drawer, there's a limit to how many rocks will fit in a drawer. And then they're going to have to go through their collection and decide which ones to take back outside and leave there for a while. If they love keeping their artwork, there's a limit to how many pieces of paper will fit in a drawer. And then they're going to have to go through their collection and decide which pieces they're going to keep and which they want to toss. And if you have a child like that loves to draw and does not want to toss any pictures, another nice little way to handle that is to send them to relatives. Send some of their handmade drawings to grandma or aunts or uncles or cousins, and let those family members do whatever needs to be done with those pictures. And then your child doesn't have to be the one tossing them in the trash or watching you do that. And another way to deal with an art-loving child is to take photos of all their work before they send it off to grandma or grandpa. Then they get to keep a picture of the picture they drew. Now, I have a lot of other tips and microsystems that we have consistently used in nurturing our marriage, training our children, homeschooling our kids, scheduling family time and vacation and extracurricular activities. Several principles that have helped us stay on track in all of those areas. But I'm late enough getting this episode out today, thanks to a very memorable trip that we took this weekend with our family. So I didn't get it done as early as I normally like to. So I'm going to save those other topics for a different episode on a different day and wrap it up right now. I hope that some of these things will help you as you apply them in your own family. If you have any specific questions about how we've done particular things, I know that this is not at all exhaustive, but hopefully we'll give you some ideas for brainstorming answers and solutions for yourself. But if there's something that you're stuck on, send me an email, flandersfamily@flandersfamily.info, info, and I will be happy to address it as I'm able to, either writing you back or putting it on a podcast soon. Thanks so much for listening today. If you have a question you'd like to hear covered on this podcast, message me on Instagram at Flanders_family or contact me through my website, lovinglifeathome.com. Before you go, if you've been encouraged by something you've heard on the show, do me a favor and forward the link to a friend or head over to Loving Life at Home on Apple iTunes to subscribe and leave a written review of the show. Your doing so will help others find me so they can listen too. Until next time, I pray the Lord will bless your efforts to build a loving home life centered on Him.